Imagine a young woman who decides to dedicate her life to the service of God. Isabela Tomasi, an Italian noblewoman, was born into a family destined for status and wealth, but chose a different path. At 15, she left everything behind to become a nun. In the convent, she was renamed Sister Maria Crocifissa della Concezione, in a ceremony symbolizing her complete dedication to faith. However, over the years, something dark began to manifest in her life. To those around her, Sister Maria's behavior went far beyond the ordinary. She claimed to be tormented by demonic forces, and others in the convent witnessed unexplainable events. This is the point where a story of faith intertwines with a profound spiritual mystery. As Maria Crocifissa sought to strengthen her faith and resist temptations, she began to sense the presence of something terrifying around her. One night in August of 1676, the young nun was found writhing on the floor of her room in a disturbing scene. Her clothes were stained and her face was distorted with an expression of fear. In her hands, she held a letter, but it wasn't just any letter. It was written in a language no one could understand. After recovering from what seemed to be a trance, the nun claimed she had no memory of writing anything. She said the letter had been dictated by Satan himself as he tried to convince her to abandon her faith and rebel against God. This account brought to light an ancient question mentioned by Paul in Ephesians 6:12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world. The letter remained an enigma. For centuries, scholars attempted to decipher its strange symbols and words, which combined Latin, Greek, and Arabic characters in an entirely unknown way. It was as if an invisible force had guided her hand as she wrote. The writing became known as the handwriting of Satan. Each time someone tried to understand its content, they found more questions than answers. What message was Satan trying to convey through that letter? And why did he choose a devoted nun to manifest his influence? In 2017, Maria's letter finally began to reveal its secrets. A group of researchers in Italy used a decryption program developed for the deep web, where complex symbols and codes are commonly shared and analyzed. With the help of this technology, they translated about 70% of the letter. The words that emerged were disturbing. In one part, the letter claimed that humans created God and that he and Jesus were dead weights. A heretical message that, when it was written, would have been seen as a direct attack on the Christian faith. The content of this letter raises questions that go beyond rational understanding. What motivated Maria to write such blasphemous words? Was she truly possessed, or was her mind playing tricks on her? Or perhaps she was a victim of a spiritual battle, with good and evil vying for her soul. The Bible repeatedly warns of the danger of deception and the spiritual enemy. Be sober and vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. 1 Peter 5:8. This biblical passage seems to come alive when we think of the moments Maria experienced. Many believe that the young nun was a spiritual martyr, a woman who tried to resist evil's onslaught until the end, but who, in her frailty, ended up writing words she herself did not understand. She may have felt Satan's real presence in her room, dictating words of scorn against God, while she fought to keep her faith intact. Over the years, the other nuns became accustomed to the strange episodes surrounding Maria Crocifissa. With each account, it seemed that the dark presence around her intensified, leaving the convent in a state of constant tension. The nuns witnessed Maria's suffering, but they were so caught up in their own spiritual duties that often all they could do was pray for her, trying to ward off the force that haunted her. What was most intriguing was that, despite the torment, Maria remained firmly dedicated to her faith. She did not rebel or seek refuge outside the convent. Instead, she seemed determined to resist, even if the cost was her sanity. Her words when recounting her torment were enigmatic. "The devil stalks me, but I do not fear. I know that no matter how much he surrounds me, I am in God's hands." Until one day in 1676, the episode occurred that would forever mark the life of Maria and all who witnessed it. The nuns found her on the floor of her room, convulsing, her face smeared with a black ink, a thick and enigmatic liquid. In one of her hands, she held a letter. That haunting scene made it clear that she was not alone in her struggle. Something else was there, something that transcended any rational explanation. When Maria finally regained consciousness, the convent plunged into silence. The other nuns surrounded her, asking what had happened, but Maria had no answers. She said she remembered nothing. Only one thing she knew for certain: the content of that letter did not come from her. Maria stated that during that trance, she felt compelled to write under an overwhelming and indescribable force. She claimed that in those moments, she was not the master of her own hand. Someone or something was guiding her writing. As soon as the letter was examined, the shock grew. The content was written in an incomprehensible script filled with symbols and mixtures of letters that seemed Latin, Greek, and something else, an unknown language. The news spread, and it wasn't long before scholars and religious figures attempted to decipher that enigma. For nearly 4 centuries, the mystery of that letter intrigued scholars. Attempts were made, but to no avail. It was as if the words were protected by an impenetrable layer of mystery. No one could make progress until in 2017, a group of researchers from the Ludum Science Center in Italy decided to apply advanced software to try to decipher the letter. And what they found was as disturbing as Maria's visions. The translation revealed phrases that questioned the very existence of God and Jesus, describing them as dead weights and insinuating that humans, and not God, were the creators of life and the world. It was a message loaded with heresy, something that could have led anyone to execution for blasphemy in Maria's time. As the content of the letter was partially translated, a shadow of unease hung over everyone who had access to its words. The sentences seemed like fragments of a dark logic, deconstructing beliefs and structures of the Christian faith, insinuating that the divine figures of God and Jesus were illusory or imposed by human will. The message was almost unbearable for any devotee, especially considering it came from a nun, someone who should be completely devoted to faith and the Church's dogmas. The discovery triggered a heated debate among theologians, linguists, and historians. For some, the letter could be a dark prank by Maria, perhaps motivated by boredom or even the repression she felt in her cloistered life. For others, the document was legitimate evidence of a demonic presence, something that shone through the strength of the writing and the enigmatic symbols. How could a woman, isolated in a convent, invent such a complex language filled with archaic symbolism? It was a mystery as disturbing as it was fascinating. Among the nuns in the convent, the reaction was no less intense. Many wondered if Maria was merely going through a spiritual crisis, something that could be remedied with more prayers and penance. However, those who had witnessed the episodes of trance and Maria's terrifying screams had no doubt about the supernatural nature of the case. The scene of the possessed nun, her face smeared with black ink and her eyes vacant, was etched in their minds, and nothing seemed sufficiently natural to explain that manifestation. As scholars advanced in the translation, additional fragments were revealed. Beyond the rejection of traditional faith, the letter suggested that humans were responsible for creating a system that deceived the masses, while the truth lay beyond human comprehension. These obscure words were interpreted in various ways. Some believe that Maria, in writing, was merely a channel for a prophetic message, perhaps an involuntary critique of the very institution she served. Others believed that the devil was using Maria to plant the seed of doubt among the religious, trying to undermine the faith of all who learned of her story. But why Maria Crocifissa? Why was that young Italian nun chosen to convey such a dark message? The records do not show that she was rebellious or had questioned her faith prior to the episodes of possession. Her life, by all indications, was devoted and austere, like that of many other nuns of the time. But her case revealed something more, something that transcended mere rebellion or a search for attention. One of the most striking theories about the possessed nun asserts that the devil may have chosen Maria precisely because of her purity of faith. The idea of corrupting someone who lived in holiness was part of the demonic plan to show that even the most devout were vulnerable. It was a clear and terrifying provocation, a reminder that no one was free from temptation, not even those women who dedicated their lives to God. For many, Maria's possession was a direct attack on the core of the Christian faith, a threat that revealed how vulnerable the human heart could be, even in the holiest of hands. The nuns who were by Maria's side and had lived with her in the convent began to question the true purpose of the letter. Contrary to what many think, they were not merely fragile and naive women. In silence and under the guidance of priests and religious leaders, some delved deeper into the studies and mysteries of faith. But this situation surpassed everything they knew. It was as if the convent had become the stage for an invisible battle where forces greater than their comprehension contested the fate of a soul. Meanwhile, rumors about Maria Crocifissa's demonic letter spread throughout the region and even beyond Italy's borders. The account of a nun possessed by the devil, writing messages of unknown origin, drew curiosity and fear. Some people began to fear that the convent was cursed, and even those who once sought spiritual guidance started to avoid the place. Maria's episode sparked interest among theologians from various places who saw in the letter a message that needed to be deciphered. But there was a deeper issue at stake. For many scholars, translating a message from the devil was a spiritual risk, almost a desecration. The Catholic Church at the time dealt with any topic involving evil very cautiously. The letter from the possessed nun was viewed as such a disturbing event that the upper echelons of the church feared the consequences of its revelation. And for many devotees, the content of the letter seemed to challenge the very notion of faith and salvation. Despite some parts of the letter being translated, religious authorities insisted on keeping certain details secret, fearing that the general public would not be able to comprehend or process its content. After all, the idea of a nun being used as a medium for a message from hell was simply terrifying. For most devotees, the convent represented a refuge against the evil of the world, but Maria Crocifissa's case threatened this view, showing that even the holiest places were not immune to the touch of darkness. As the analysis progressed, an interpretation began to gain traction among some scholars. They believed that the letter could be a type of warning or provocation made by the devil, aimed at weakening the faith of those who attempted to understand it. Between the lines, the content of the letter seemed to imply that the very religious structure was a human invention, created to satisfy worldly needs and devoid of meaning in the spiritual realm. This idea was almost unbearable for many theologians who saw in the letter a clear attack on the fundamental truths of the Christian faith. Others, however, viewed the letter as a reflection of Maria's own internal conflicts. According to this perspective, the young nun may have secretly struggled with doubts and feelings of despair, and the possession only amplified these agonies, transforming them into something sinister and uncontrollable. For these scholars, the letter represented the pain of a soul caught between faith and disbelief, between love for God and fear of the forces of evil. Yet ultimately, no interpretation was sufficient to justify the unusual language and intricate symbolism found in the document. Over time, the convent of Palma di Montechiaro became increasingly isolated. The story of the possessed nun and her demonic letter made many fear even visiting the place. Some nuns left the convent, claiming to feel a malignant presence still haunting the halls. Others, however, decided to stay, believing that Maria Crocifissa's suffering was a divine test, something they should endure with faith and humility. Even centuries after the event, Maria's letter still echoed in the religious community as a reminder of the mysteries that the Christian faith could not fully explain. After all, how could a woman who dedicated her life to holiness be chosen to be a vessel for a message from darkness? This question remains to this day as one of the great enigmas of religious history, leaving all who hear her story with a sense of discomfort and doubt. For the nuns who remained in the convent, the presence of Maria Crocifissa served as a constant reminder of the dark mysteries that challenged human understanding. Days and nights became marked by the psychological weight of what had occurred. Some sisters reported having recurring nightmares, as if Maria's very presence had become ingrained in their minds. Others confessed that while praying, they felt as if they were being watched by something beyond the walls of the convent. This atmosphere of tension intertwined with devotion, creating a unique ambiance. Each act of prayer was also a plea for protection against the evil that seemed to be lurking. To bear this burden, the nuns and priests of the convent sought to intensify their religious practices in an attempt to dispel any remnants of the dark influence they felt. They believed that by reinforcing faith and communion, they could purify the environment and alleviate the spiritual weight hanging over them. It was at this moment that the convent introduced regular prayer and fasting sessions, where everyone gathered in an effort to exorcise the malignant influences and restore peace. These practices strengthened the faith of those who remained and renewed their commitment to serve God above all. Curiously, despite the fear and doubts haunting everyone, there was also an opposite movement, a deep spiritual renewal. The sisters began to feel that they were being tested, that God was allowing this episode as a trial of their convictions. The suffering of Maria Crocifissa came to be seen not just as a sinister event, but as a symbol of sacrifice and perseverance. In their minds, they faced the darkness in the name of faith. Years later, the convent returned to its normal routine, but the case of Maria Crocifissa remained an unforgettable reminder. Her story was passed down from generation to generation, told as a warning about the dangers of doubt and spiritual temptations. The letter, considered a cursed object, was kept under guard but was never forgotten. Some believed it contained information of spiritual value, while others thought it best to leave it untouched and forgotten. However, human curiosity continued to grow over time, and interest in Maria Crocifissa's case remained alive, studied by historians and religious researchers throughout the centuries. Today, the legacy of Maria Crocifissa and her demonic letter is not merely a tale of horror or a legend. It is a powerful reminder of how faith, doubt, fear, and mystery intertwine in the human experience. The letter may never be fully understood, and perhaps that is part of its purpose. After all, there are things in spirituality and faith that escape human logic and may never be explained. Today, the case of Maria Crocifissa is a true enigma that challenges our modern understanding of the supernatural and the spiritual. The demonic letter, its mysterious content, and the disturbing events surrounding this nun raise countless questions. Was it a genuine spiritual manifestation? An unprecedented psychological phenomenon? Or perhaps a divine warning about the dangers of doubt and hidden temptations? For scholars and people of faith, Maria's case serves as a powerful reflection on the limits of human reason and the power of spiritual forces. The contemporary world, marked by speed and superficiality, offers little space for deep reflection and understanding mysteries that defy simple explanations. Yet, stories like that of Maria Crocifissa capture our attention, urging us to slow down from time to time and reflect on what lies beyond what we see and touch. This ancient mystery is not just a dark tale from a 17th century Italian convent. It is an invitation to revisit our own spirituality. In an increasingly confusing and chaotic world, Maria's case reminds us of the importance of questioning, of having faith, and at the same time, being attentive to what lies beyond our everyday perception. If this story has sparked your curiosity, touched you on a deeper level, or made you reflect on the power and mysteries of faith, I invite you to join us. Subscribe to our channel to explore not only the inexplicable events of history, but also to understand how they connect to our spiritual journey today. Here, we share stories that challenge reason and explore the unexplainable, stories that bring us closer to a deeper truth and invite us to question what we know. Click the subscribe button and join us on this quest. After all, mystery, fear, and faith are inseparable companions on the human journey.